Brilliant. Welcome back, everybody. I'm really excited about this next session because it feels like it's slightly different from many of the sessions that we've had over the last day and a bit. And we're going to be talking about how to boost cyber security. So obviously improving cyber security, a huge issue for governments around the world. And as we were saying in that last session, AI brings lots of opportunities. It also brings lots of risks, not least as an issue that came up because there will be some criminal players, some people who don't have best intentions, who are also embracing that technology and maybe changing the nature of the threats that we are facing. We have three really expert speakers with us here. I am going to, as ever, get in a conversation with our three speakers, and then I'm going to throw it open to you in the audience. If you do want to move in, that's absolutely fine. It's just it's a slight risk if you're at the edges that I can't see you as well from here in the dark. So if you do want to move in and you know you're going to ask a question, that's absolutely fine. There is a very strange noise that has just started. I'm not sure if that is going to... It sounds like somebody's drilling upstairs. That's the cyber session, you see. That's somebody trying to listen into what we're doing. Hopefully that won't last too long. But I don't know if Anne's in the room, if we can see what's going on with that noise. Okay, so in terms of our fantastic three panelists here today, we've got Richard Horne, who is the Chief Executive Officer at the National Cyber Security Centre here in the UK. We've got Po T. Duncan, who is the Chief Information Security Officer of the Government of Canada, which sits in the Treasury Board of Canada Secretariat. And we've got Martin Bauer, a great friend of Global Government Forum, Deputy Director of Securing Government Services, sitting in the Central Digital and Data Office in the UK, which is now in DCIT.
Yeah, we're now in DCIT. So it's GDS.
It's the GDS.
And we are now part of DCIT.
Now in DCIT. Fantastic. So I'm going to open with a question, because we talked about cyber last year, for those of you who were last year at Innovation. So given that things are changing so quickly in the world of technology in particular, can you give us a sense of what's changed in the context of cyber and cyber security just in that period, maybe, of the last 12 years? Richard, I'll come to you first.
Yeah, thank you very much. So good morning, everyone. Great to see you. So I think the thing that is changing more rapidly than we realize is really the imperative for us to act in this space. And it's largely driven by exposure, because we are building more and more digitally enabled services, which is fantastic. It's transforming governments, transforming the experience for our citizens, and it's creating better government. However, there are consequences, and one consequence is we're more dependent on technology. And every year, we're more dependent than the year before. And what that means is, from the perspective of defending against cyber attacks, we are more exposed to the impact of a cyber attack. So the same cyber attack today as a year ago would have greater impact because we're more exposed to that impact. Meanwhile, the threat continues to develop. So our nation-state adversaries in cyberspace are becoming more and more capable, more and more sophisticated, and in the last year we've seen some really quite significant steps, especially those announced from the US with things like Volt Typhoon and Salt Typhoon. And at the same time, we see the criminal ecosystem developing, possibly splintering a bit, so it's becoming more fragmented, which means in some ways it's harder to manage. And also, really driven by ransomware. So we're still seeing a huge amount of ransomware, and probably the most pressing threat for the stability of especially government services. Meanwhile, we also have hacktivist groups. So they tend to be geopolitically aligned, tend to be aligned with areas of conflict. So there's quite a lot of hacktivist groups in Russia and in the Middle East with the conflicts in both those areas. And they are more like criminals in their sort of ability and their sophistication, but aligned to national interests. And then finally, we see a continued uptick in the proliferation of attack tooling. So the marketplace for especially sort of second-tier nation states in the cyber league, as it were, to be able to acquire the ability to prosecute attacks just by using commercial tooling that's available to them. So that's one half of the risk equation. The other half is our ability to defend and be resilient. And you'll have seen quite a bit recently with the Public Accounts Committee and others, the National Audit Office, being quite frank about the fact that our ability to defend our government services against these attacks is not where it needs to be. And I would say for us as a nation, not just government, we often overlook what resilience means as well, which is more than just defense, but it's the ability to continue operations and to rebuild in the face of a successful cyber attack. So really that side of the equation needs to change to match the growing threat and exposure side of the equation. Otherwise the gap just continues to grow between them. So greater imperative to act, and innovation, the theme of this conference, is really an opportunity to start to close that gap. Because if we can build cybersecurity in new waves of digital services, we can build secure by design, we can build the right thinking in how services are developed, then it gives us the ability to close that gap.
And do you think, on that note, on innovation, do you think as departments are doing their kind of digital strategies, are they thinking enough about cyber? Or are they thinking just about, changing their legacy systems and delivering to the...
I think that's a great question. And things like removing legacy systems, as you'll have seen with the NAO report, that's a key part of driving our cybersecurity. But cybersecurity needs to be baked into the strategy rather than an add-on after the strategy is set. So it's sort of a lot of organizations, and it's not just government, tend to think of, we'll have a digital-first strategy, we're going down this route, and we need to manage this cyber risk. Whereas actually, if you think about it as the same thing, then there's opportunities to close the gap as part of that strategy development.
Thanks. Thanks so much. And so to Po and then Martin, I'm going to ask you the same thing. From where you sit, how have things changed over the last 12 months?
So bonjour à tous. Thanks again for having me here. It's an honor to be here to speak on this panel. In the context, I think Richard laid out a really great threat context from a UK perspective, and that really actually applies to the government of Canada as well, and in Canada. I would say that the bad actors are also changing their tactics and techniques and really pushing towards the edge of our networks. And just to Richard's point, within the Treasury of Canada Secretariat, we are the leaders in terms of the policy direction for departments and agencies. We actually oversee the government security posture for over 100 institutions within the GC. And in terms of our whole government approach for cybersecurity, we did actually publish a GC enterprise cybersecurity strategy last year. And that really is our vision and plan for the cybersecurity of government operations. We really lay out measures and initiatives in terms of protecting government systems, protecting Canadians' personal information, and really strengthening the resilience of government, exactly what Richard highlighted, and what we need in terms of defending our networks. So for us, it's really about making sure we're working closely with our departments and agencies to operationalize cybersecurity, because cybersecurity is a shared responsibility. It is part of a team sport. And I do want to also highlight the external-facing cyber strategy that our public safety colleagues have published. So last month, they published the National Cybersecurity Strategy. So they're looking at more of a whole society approach and really building partnerships in terms of not just with other levels of government, but also with private sector and academia. Because again, I always talk about the security of the government of Canada supports the security of Canada. And so for us, having understanding the threat context really helps us to inform our strategy and really supporting the secure, reliable delivery of digital services.
Thanks so much, Bo. And similarly, Martin, your thoughts?
Thank you very much. Before I do that, can I just share something, a top tip? I think it's always important that we go away with some practical knowledge that you can apply. You talked about the Parliamentary Accounts Committee. I was in the Cyber Parliamentary Accounts Committee. Here is my top tip if you ever have to go and sit in a Parliamentary Accounts Committee. If the principal witness is quite short and you are quite tall, don't sit in the chair behind the principal witness. You have to practice a poker face for 2.5 hours. So there you go, you've learned something valuable today. What's changed? A lot has changed, and you've heard the themes already, so I'll try and kind of make some of those a bit real. The first thing is around threat, and we had this we have the real threat. We know about the things that have happened, the incidents. In the last year, a piece of critical infrastructure that I happen to be responsible for faced an attack by a sophisticated actor. There is only one reason why anyone would want to attack this particular piece of critical infrastructure. So this particular supplier, we talked about the blending of where we care about and the supply chain and the blurring of boundaries. So this is a private sector organization. They were well prepared. They were able to detect the attack. They were able to prevent the most damaging consequences of the attack, and they were able to clean up afterwards. They were really impressive. It was only because they were prepared. But I kind of took it personally that sophisticated nation states have finally gone, oh, yes, we're going to attack this. We're going to go into this place. So, threat, real. Digital context. You've heard a lot over the past 2 days about the importance of digital solutions and services. You'll have heard it in the Prime Minister's statement. You'll hear it in the Chancellor's statement. It was in the instructions for responding to the SR from departments. So that point about us becoming ever more dependent on digital services is very real as well. If you were here at the start of the day to hear the really impressive guest from Ukraine speak, you'll have seen just how fast they've managed to do digital transformation. And it's one of the catalysts from that, an appalling catalyst, is the fact that they are at war. We have a slower burn feeling of that kind of crisis in the UK with particularly the economic situation. So that looking to digital is really, really important. There's a realization that's happened over the last year with things like CrowdStrike that it isn't just about cybersecurity. We need to care much more about our wider resilience. So there's the digital resilience, but also wider technical risk. And that makes you start to look at questions like, how have we ended up in this place with legacy? So that broader understanding is really important. The third thing that has changed, particularly for us in the sort of the digital center of government, is structural. It's this, the move into DCIT. Why have we done it? So the new government was very keen to actually consolidate the digital center of government, to actually make it more powerful, to give it a stronger voice. And oh boy, we're seeing that. I genuinely wasn't sure how it was going to work out. But actually, in terms of the higher priority, the airtime that you get with ministers, the prevalence of the digital and transformational conversation across cabinet, that is a radical step change, a radical step change. So that's a big change. That comes with a whole lot of opportunity. And as I say, you'll see the need for transformation come through all of the SR discussions and the challenges out to department. It comes with challenge. I'm not used to having to deal with 3 or 4 ministerial queries or commissions and things every week. That's the reality that we now operate in. It's really cool. You get to talk to ministers about things and you get the airtime that you never really had before on this topic. But it also, you have to balance it with the long-term hard grind of driving up cyber maturity and cyber preparedness across government. So those 3 things. Threat's never been higher. The digital context has never been more important to us. And with the structure, we've never been better positioned to make a difference. But State of Digital Government, the Cybersecurity NAO report and the associated parliamentary accounts committees, we have to make a step change. And that is the challenge for not us on the panel, or not just us on the panel, but everyone out there. How do we make that step change?
Thanks, Martin. And thanks to all of you. Just, I've got a couple more questions for the panel, and then I am going to come to the audience. So on that, you've all said the threat has never been high, and we hear that kind of every year. And that does worry me, and I'm sure it worries kind of other people. And I'm just wondering, as all countries are facing this, how good are we at learning from each other? So especially to you, Richard, you sit in the National Cybersecurity Centre. How connected are you to kind of your peers in other countries? How good are we at learning from each other? And are there things that we should be sharing with each other in this area?
So I guess the short answer is massively. And I'm fairly new in this role. I joined about 6 months ago. And the thing that's really struck me is exactly that, just how dependent we are on our allies and our peers globally, but also how connected we are. So I've been out in Canada with my peer out there, Rajiv, who heads the Cybersecurity Centre there, and also Scott, who runs Poe's organisation, and just learning from them and them learning from us. We, as allies, and especially the 5 Eyes that you've heard a lot about recently, we do a huge amount together. We co-develop, we help each other, we support each other, we share intelligence. It's a massively integrated approach that we have across our allies to our cybersecurity, and that reaps huge benefits. When we see something in one nation start to unfold, then the ability to quickly piece the pieces together as a sort of a group and come up with solutions and counter threats and work with private sector is so important. And the other thing that's really important is private sector is global. Most of the organizations we work with are global organizations, so we have to work together. And then a wider group of allies. My second week in the job, I was out in Singapore at Singapore International Cyber Week, which is a huge gathering. And just the number of international allies we have globally in Asia and really importantly in Europe is really quite significant. And the closeness of working is phenomenal.
Yeah, so that's reassuring in a way, very reassuring to hear. My question to Martin and Poe, to both of you, is a bit different in that you've both said, how now our services, the way we do things across the public sector, increasingly digital. My sense in the UK is that, and this has come up, is that departments still, even though we're trying to break that down through missions, are more siloed in the way they are doing their digital transformation. Whereas in Canada, you have more of a strategy, more of a kind of shared service model approach. Are there pros and cons to those different approaches when it comes to how secure you are, when it comes to your cybersecurity? Martin's laughing, so Poe, I'm going to come to you first.
Well, maybe I'll start. So I think within Canada, I think we've come a long way over the last decade in terms of our cybersecurity offenses. Shared Services Canada is our GC IT infrastructure provider, and they were established in about 2011. In 2018, the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity was stood up as a sort of a central coordinated approach for cybersecurity within the Government of Canada. And then, of course, Treasury Board, Canada Secretariat, really setting the policy direction. And so all three of us working together in concert in terms of cybersecurity within the GC. And in particular, Shared Services Canada, we benefit a lot from having these centralized consolidated infrastructure services. In particular, SSC delivers is the backbone of our digital government and powers a lot of government services. They also host our what we call the SSC managed gateways, our internet gateways out to from our departmental enterprise networks out to the internet. And included in those gateways are the cyber defense services that are offered by the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity. So it really provides the umbrella of protection that offers lots of benefits in terms of more visibility, in terms of what's going in and out of the GC network. Provides more coordinated approach. So if something bad does happen, we're alerted as soon as possible, and then we're able to mitigate quickly. So that provides us a lot of centralized services. SSC also helps, is the implementation arm, so there's lots of standardization in terms of the workplace technology devices, in terms of like mobile devices. So if you're leveraging SSC services there, we're able to apply policies quickly at one central location that's applied to many departments. So that provides us with great value. And of course, having common solutions that are made available to departments and agencies also provides us with cost efficiencies, right? So it doesn't make sense in this, in our times of fiscal restraint to have each department setting up their own IT infrastructure. We leverage the services from SSC that provides us with savings there. Maybe as an example, even if we have adopting cloud services, we establish from a Treasury perspective the cloud guardrails that really lays out the expectations that we have for departments leveraging cloud, and that includes deployment of cloud-based sensors as part of those cloud environments. So that provides the Cyber Center with telemetry, so we're able to quickly detect and identify issues that we need to mitigate, and then the SSC helps us with the validation of those guardrails. So it's not just about setting the policies and the controls, but actually validating that they are put in place. So lots of benefits from having a common centralized IT service provider.
Yeah. So Martin, are you jealous?
I am jealous. We were out in October and visiting and sort of looking at some of those capabilities, and I think a number of us went away going, oh, I wish we could do that. But you know what? We're not a greenfield site, and all large organizations go through phases of more centralization, more federalization, more centralization. So we are where we are. A lot of the lessons that we've taken away, though, are that we have this challenge where we have some organizations which have really high cyber maturity and strong skill sets and capabilities and teams. We have a lot of organizations in the public sector where that's just not practical or feasible. They're much smaller teams trying to do smaller things. So what we're trying to do with something you may have heard of, a stronger interventionist model and some more central cyber services, is trying to find what's the sweet spot between these two models. It wouldn't be practical for us to say we will do cybersecurity just in the centre. It won't work in the UK public sector. But equally, it's weird that we expect every organisation to be excellent at all manner of defence, right? That's just not practical. So we're looking at how we bring some services into the centre or provide some central services. One of them, vulnerability scanning for government, is actually a Kickstarter project for the Digital Centre, the GDS, which I'm both happy about and also is slightly a rod for my back because it means the Secretary of State cares quite a lot about it. And there will be other services coming as well that are better done in the centre. And we've got really strong endorsement of that from the Cabinet and from a number of other sort of governance bodies as well. So look forward to building out a lot of those. They're going to be really interesting. A lot of them are based on the Canadian model, so it's really important that we keep looking at that. Also the Australian model. So to come back to the original question, we like looking out across and seeing what people are doing and seeing what we can bring to this party. Because I'm a perfectionist, I think I mark my report card, must try harder.
Okay, must try harder. So on that, must try harder. I'm coming over to the audience who I know will try really hard. So who has it? Yes, we've got a question down here at the front and then a lady there as well. So we've got 2 questions. Oh, and one there. And then Anne, there are 2 questions here. So the gentleman at the front and then one there. Yes, over to you.
Hello, from DFT. Just a question personal. Obviously, cybersecurity is very, very scary, very scary for a lot of people. But also, we've got privacy.
Yep.
We've also got the recent Apple case, where you, as the cybersecurity, wanted to get information from Apple. They're taking that to court at the moment to try to overturn that. So where does that stand going forward, where cybersecurity is either going to work or cybersecurity is being penalised by privacy rights?
So first thing I'd say is that what you mentioned was speculation around a court case that clearly in government we're not going to comment on. But the broader principle of privacy and cybersecurity, I think, there's some really important points to consider. The first one is that they're not actually mutually exclusive. Cybersecurity is far more than just one control, which is often talked about end-to-end encryption. And in many cases where people focus on end-to-end encryption as being the key control, actually the weaknesses are elsewhere. So as a defender, securing the endpoints actually is far more of a challenge and far more where the attackers are likely to go than compromising some really heavily protected central point where end-to-end encryption might break. So I think the important thing is to stay focused on the risk, and that's what cybersecurity is about, and to be focused on what controls are going to impact the risk the most. And the biggest challenge in cybersecurity is on the endpoints and not in that middle point against the vast majority of threats.
Thanks. We have got lots of questions, so unless you wanted to come in on that one, that's fine. So, gentleman over here, thanks.
So I have a different kind of question. It's about resilience and behaviour. So how do we test our resilience and behaviour? And I want to use an example of if we don't let our buildings burn down to test what we do in the event of a fire. What we do is we do fire drills. We don't seem to do this for cyber attacks. So I work with the MOD. If you do this with a cyber attack, or you test a cyber attack, it's a pretend one, if you like, to see what people do and how people behave. The implications is, the work stops and no one can do any work. But you kind of do that when you leave a building. So have you got any thoughts on that and how that could work within government environments, how we can test attacks, but they're not real attacks, but we just need to know what to do?
I really like this question. I think there are things that are done, and I think I've heard about it. Yeah, so Po, I'm going to come to you first.
So I mentioned earlier our GC Enterprise Cybersecurity Strategy, and we have an implementation plan that supports that strategy. And one of the initiatives that actually got funded this past year was our establishment of a purple team. So it's a red team, so we're basically simulating the techniques of bad actors, and then a blue team, basically the defenders of the network. So together they make the purple team. And so it's our proactive approach in terms of actively testing and simulating those attacks so that we can identify weaknesses in our environment and address them before the actual bad actors do. So that's one area that we are actually moving forward with in the context of the Government of Canada. I would also say in terms of it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when a cyber incident occurs. So it's really of utmost importance to have a plan and make sure that you're actually testing that. So on a regular basis, we do cyber simulation exercises where we have a simulated incident that occurs, and then we have key players who are part of that responsible for addressing those attacks engage. So certainly in terms of Purple Team, so active audits, and then in terms of testing our cybersecurity event management plan goes a long way. We also reinforce this with our departments. So we have a GC-wide one at the enterprise level, but we also expect our departments and agencies also have a departmental CSEMP, we call it, so that they have their clear roles and responsibilities within their environments. And we actually, as one of our audit requirements, we do actually ask that, have you tested it? Do you have a plan, and have you tested it? And we actually collect the plans as well. So for us, it's really making sure that it's a bit of a trust but verify model in terms of the cybersecurity of our government departments.
Thanks. I'm just going to come back because you were shaking your head. Was this not what you meant? You not? So you mean like, yeah. So like you would do a fire drill
Yeah,
where
so
everybody has to clear the building.
Rather than just individual tests of
systems.
it's like, so the whole building, the computers turn pink
Yeah.
screen.
Yeah,
So
and it's a great point, because I think it's probably...
everyone across the board, all different departments,
Yeah.
all like, oh, I can't, my screen's gone pink. What do I do?
So I think the biggest lesson from working with countless organizations that have been hit by ransomware is we place false assurance on what we think is disaster recovery plans and business continuity plans, but they're for the wrong kind of disaster. So most organizations, you would say, we've got a disaster recovery plan. And then you unpick it, and it's either done on a system-by-system basis, or it's done to be able to deal with a flood that takes out one data center or a fire that takes out one data center rather than all of IT. And the biggest challenge, you've seen countless ransomware victims take months to recover. And the reason is because it's a huge, huge effort to rebuild all of your IT. When you've been hit by a destructive cyber attack, which is basically what ransomware is, and other types are available, when you've been hit by that kind of attack, then it is a huge undertaking. And if you just work it out in terms of person hours, to reinstall the operating system on every single server, if you've got 1,000 servers and it takes 5 hours per server, that's 5,000 person hours. And how big is your IT team that's going to do it? It's not big enough. And just having a plan for that rebuild is what actually most organizations don't have. But they think they have disaster recovery, and then they get hit by a destructive cyber attack and they find it was for the wrong kind of disaster. So if there's one big gap, I would say it's exactly that. It's what's your plan to continue operations without any IT for weeks? And if you can answer that, then that's great. The next question is, what's your plan, and what's your engineering to enable that plan to rebuild your IT rapidly in the face of that situation?
And I think the challenge, though, from the question is, how do you test that plan without literally turning off your systems? Because the cost of even doing that test then would be, the balance is probably
Which is
not.
where that rebuild can be tested in isolated environments. And some of our big banks have done exactly this under a lot of pressure from the regulators. They have worked out how they would rebuild payments in a day. And it's a phenomenal undertaking, and it's taken years for them to work it out. And that's just one part of the bank. But that's the kind of thinking we all need to start going through.
Yeah. Martin, you good? Next.
It comes down to priorities and time and availability. So the test of every individual in the organization currently wouldn't be something that most permsecs would say, that's something I'm going to do. So we are stuck to testing at those different levels, right the way from, if you're building something secure by design, you're baking in your testing. If you're doing GovAssure, you are doing all sorts of testing around that. We test the crisis structures reasonably regularly at different levels. It's not a kind of coordinated test plan across government, but people do. But I would love to be able to do that. I would love to be able to say, DWP, take a day and just test your full crisis, just stop services. We just can't do it right now. I'm with Richard on this, though, right? As time goes on, we are going to have to start thinking the unthinkable much, much more.
But I
So
think
the
this is
priority-
where the tie with innovation is really important, because what we've seen is organizations that have started to innovate in terms of how they build their IT services with more infrastructure as code and that kind of thing. They're creating an infrastructure that can be rebuilt rapidly. And if you treat it as one and the same thing, sort of managing the risk and innovation, then you can make real leaps in how you design and engineer your IT so that you can rebuild it quickly if needed. And then it's not for the whole organization to test, it's for a few people to test, but you can test it in an isolated environment.
And that's what we're going to mean by, as we start building resilience into the way we do technology, that's exactly the direction we're going to be going in, just by default. So you'll have to explain why you're not designing your systems and services that way.
Thanks. We've got another question here, and then the microphone over there, maybe. Thanks.
So yeah, I work for the Department of Work and Pension, and my question kind of comes down to what is the plan for cyber or AI or all of this sort of digital stuff to come together with the department, because we're on the front line of dealing with, you know, the unemployed, the people that need to transfer their skills, the people that need to work towards something. And at the moment, I don't see that kind of push. And I even, like, on a day-to-day basis, I'm having to warn people of things like, you know, your CV's got your full address, your nationality, your date of birth, everything like that. There's not even a kind of information being put out to the customers, to the UK public, about that kind of basic level of cybersecurity, let alone on a wider scale, and what we're going to do as far as moving us closer towards being more cyber competent or digital competent in a wider market. So I'm curious if there's any plans sort of to work with the Department of Work and Pension to kind of introduce more education to the UK public?
Another really good question. I like this. I'm going to broaden it out a little bit. So are there things that you see regularly that frustrate you, the basics that should be being done on cyber hygiene, whether it's staff maybe still doing things that they shouldn't be doing, and then what role do we have in the public sector to educate the public on how they can do some of those basic cyber hygiene things? I'll start with you again, Robin.
Yeah, so
Richard.
on the public point, it's a great point. And we had a campaign which we launched last Friday, which The Guardian unhelpfully attributed a quote to me that I didn't make, but it was actually quite a good quote. And that was Black Friday's becoming Black Fraud Day, which I didn't say that, but they attributed it to me.
Take it.
Yeah, I'll take it, that's right. But it was a big campaign that we put out with Stop Think Fraud, and it was all around using two-factor authentication, two-step verification to stop people taking over your accounts, and then a whole load of sort of good fraud advice as well. And the interesting thing was, for the first time, we got the big tech providers to support it. So Amazon emailed all of their customers to encourage them to turn on two-step verification on their Amazon accounts. And we had a big kind of coordinated push. And that kind of thing is, I think, where we can make a big difference collectively, but we can't do it just as government. We have to work with the big providers that actually have people's attention. And I think there's a real opportunity for DWP to provide advice as part of their service as well, in the same way as Amazon did and do. So the more we can do that, then I think the more we can start to make it part of the fabric of our society.
And also, some of the scams are becoming so smart, aren't they? So clever that I think helping to keep educating the public about what's out there and what to look out for, really important as well. Po, you'll
So
talk.
within Canada, we do have a Get Cyber Safe campaign. So that's been running, I think, annually for a number of years. So that's certainly something that provides advice to our Canada and people in Canada. We also launched mandatory cybersecurity training. So within the Government of Canada, so every employee has to sign up and perform their training on an annual basis so that they can get up-to-date information about the cyber threats. We actually also actively work with our departments. I think Ema was on the previous panel. We work closely with our Employment Services and Development Canada in terms of making sure that the services they provide to Canadians in Canada are secure. And so when we actually do the testing in terms of a potential cyber incident and making sure that we're testing our plans with them. So for us, we're really trying to tackle this from a Canada perspective with our partners at Public Safety and the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity, and then within the GC in terms of increasing knowledge on cybersecurity with our employees. So having that mandatory training goes a long way so that everybody has that foundational knowledge.
Thanks. Martin.
I won't answer for the how we educate citizens part, because I think you've got two answers there. There's something about how we think about in Secure by Design when we're delivering and building services to help people protect themselves. So it annoys me if I see services that people have designed that require people to do something that is not particularly secure. We need to get over that and stop doing it. It annoys me when we pass around or we gather information that contains sensitivities that we really don't need. As we look much more about data sharing across government, we're now getting much smarter about how do we provide appropriate protection at every layer. So how do I avoid sharing information that may identify special characteristics? I was talking to a lady on one of the stalls out there about things like planning bus routes. So one of the challenges they have is, in order to plan the bus routes for school children pickups, they have to be very careful because you can reveal, for example, the addresses of SEND children. People with special needs. That is a protected characteristic. So actually thinking more coherently about how we design our services to minimize risk to citizens, I think is a really key part of this.
Thanks, Martin. So we've got another question, I think, over here. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. Hi there. My name is Jason, and I designed and delivered two cybersecurity programs. One was called LORCA, the London Office for Rapid Cybersecurity Advancement, and the other one was called Cyber Runway, both funded by DCMS. And in the first program, that was 72 scale-ups. And the second one is 178 different cyber organizations, from people with ideas to ones that are midway through to other ones that are scaling up. And I know NCSC has its own accelerator. So there's a lot of thinking around a lot of these things that we're talking about, that if there was a cohort of people who were kind of on all of our side to have a consultancy or some other term that can be helpful to all of us, that might be something to consider tapping into. So
kind of bringing together people with the expertise who could then share that and scale up.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're working with Queen's University Belfast, the Centre for Secure Information Technologies up there. So there's a lot of thinking around these cybersecurity ideas that I think that if we were working together and collaborating, that might be something to consider.
So any thoughts on this? This has come up so many times in our sessions, is how do you share good practice and learning across governments, across different organizations and bodies? Poe, you're nodding at that one.
Oh, I mean, for us, as part of the National Cybersecurity Strategy, one of the initiatives is the establishment of a Canadian Cyber Collective Defense. So basically, it is that partnership, again, going back to having academia there, having private sector, having government, in terms of identifying and developing solutions to address the challenges for tomorrow. So certainly that's something that we're launching this year as part of the National Cybersecurity Strategy.
Thanks. Anyone else on sharing good practice?
Yeah. So I think one of the key sort of ethos of us in the National Cybersecurity Centre is we can't do it. We can't solve cybersecurity. We can't do it alone. Our mission is to sit at the center of an ecosystem that stimulates private sector organizations and startups and charities and all sorts of organizations to basically become more of a movement than us think we can do it ourselves. We don't have all the answers. We can't impact every organization in the country. So we have a whole load of, as you referred to, we've worked on startups. We have assured consulting schemes where consulting organizations can be assured and you can make use of their services knowing that they'll be providing sound advice. We have certified incident response organizations where, again, we've validated the way they do incident response, and they share information with us, and we share information with them. So if you have a cyber breach, then there's a whole scheme of organizations you can turn to get good quality support. And it just goes on and on with the number of ways we've kind of stimulated the system. Cyber Essentials is a great example, which is kind of the basic controls, foundational controls that every organization should have. And working with IASME, the small and medium enterprise organization, there's now, I think, 300 small businesses that can help other small businesses get Cyber Essentials and make it easy. And it's stimulating that system that is really our whole ethos, because that's the only way we'll build a secure society.
Thanks. We've got time for at least one more question. Who has another question? I haven't taken one from that side of the room. Anne's running over the other side there. Right at the back, Anne, just to make you stretch your legs. There we go. Thank you.
Hi, yeah. In terms of the future of cybersecurity in this country, how does it intertwine with any military action we might have in the countries, and cybersecurity threats and cyber warfare?
Great question. So cyber, and I'm going to widen this again. So the interaction of cyber and kind of potential military action, but also just could you say a little bit about, I'm surprised this hasn't come up as a question already, but the shifting geopolitics that we're in, and kind of we talked about the importance of allies and things like that, but are we seeing more activity at a state level when it comes to maybe cyber influence or attacks on some of our processes? So I'm going to broaden it out to kind of geopolitics as well. Martin, I don't know if you are able to say anything on those areas. I know it becomes a bit sensitive, but give it your best shot.
I will. I was expecting this question, and so it's always the trap when you have access to privileged information to figure out what you can and can't say. But what I would say is, you have seen in open source reporting, in statements laid before Parliament, quite a lot of material that talks about those kinds of more advanced attacks, the pre-positioning we've already mentioned, and sort of major espionage attacks as well. So all of that information is out there in open source. You can read it and draw your own conclusions from it. Does the geopolitics change how we defend, I think is an interesting nuance. I don't think it does change what we do on the ground on a daily basis, if I'm honest. Because when everyone's attacking you anyway, it's useful and interesting, and it changes the threat, and knowing more about the threat tells you, I guess, where you're going to point your eyes, point your defenses. But actually, we have to design and build a system that's resilient against attacks all the way up and down that sophistication stack, and across the full spectrum of different types of effect that attackers are trying to achieve. So does it change what we do on a daily basis? Not really. Have we now been able to acknowledge much more fully the kinds of attacks that we face? Definitely, and that is very helpful in the debate. It's not, we talked about scaring people. It's not designed to scare. It's designed to actually bring to the surface the debate about the prioritization and where digital workforce needs to be and the kinds of capabilities we need to do, and why I do annoying things in the center, like say, you must be secure by design, all public sector organizations. So it's really about trying to help that conversation.
Poe, your thoughts on all of this? Very close to some of this, I imagine.
Absolutely. So last year, the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity published the National Cyber Threat Assessment, and it does outline the different threat actors that we're facing in terms of, as well as nation states. And we're definitely victims of some of these issues and incidents. And so for us, it's about setting, and in particular, last year we were affected, 3 of our high security organizations were affected by cyber incidents. And the evidence that we collect from departments show that some departments aren't compliant to our policy requirements, which are the basic, like minimum baseline controls that we need to implement, including things like multi-factor authentication, patching our systems. And so for us, we really try to help departments reinforce these priority actions by establishing what we call a cyber fit challenge, so improving cyber health within a 3, 6, 9-month time frame. So everybody's really busy. We have the policy requirements, but we're trying to help departments prioritize specific actions. And that includes things like making sure you're implementing our host-based sensors within all our endpoints, making sure that you're patching those edge devices. So that really goes a long way in terms of trying to shore up our defenses to protect against the threat actors. So for us, it's really helping departments prioritize those basic actions that all of us should be taking, even, so we're talking about government services, but also within our own personal lives, implementing multi-factor authentication with your personal accounts, making sure that you patch your endpoints, right? So, have those automatic updates configured to really protect your personal information as well. So doing lots of things to, I would say, same thing, like our foundational practices will still help us defend against those things that will always, the ever-evolving threat landscape, so.
Thanks. Yes.
Just to add, so our annual review in December talked about some of the changing threat picture and how geopolitics is driving threat. And you can download that from our website. And Martin and Poe are absolutely right that at the end of the day, the capability that will defend us against ransomware is the first step of the capability we need to defend against all sorts of nation-state attacks. And yes, cybersecurity is part of conflict. And if we're looking at a world where conflict might become more norm, then we have to build that capability as a first step, and then we in the NCSC and intelligence agencies can worry about the more sophisticated threats and the more nuances that we need to get after as a nation.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Unless there is a final burning question from anyone, as I said, I don't want anyone to leave without not having asked their question. Well, we are out of time as it is. So thank you so much, the audience, for your questions. Thank you to our fantastic panel. Thank you for lending us all of your time and your expertise. If you are still going through the exhibition and people want to maybe grab you for a question or so that they didn't want to ask on the floor, hopefully that's okay if they do that before you leave. We are now going to break for our lunch, so you don't have to be back in your next session until 20 to 2, so you have an hour for your lunch break. But before you go off to lunch, please join me in a nice warm round of applause for our great panel here. Thank you so much, everybody, and enjoy your lunch. Thanks a lot.